Welcome back to This Is Jax. On today's episode, we have a fascinating guest with us, someone whose journey through various professional and personal landscapes has given him a wealth of knowledge and experience. We'll hear from David Theus and how he went from growing up in Orlando before moving to London and then finally settling down here in Jax. How today he continues to pour that wisdom that he gained on the journey into the youth and the future of Jacksonville. If you're a first-time listener, be sure to subscribe, turn on your notifications so you don't miss a thing. Welcome to This Is Jax, a hyper-local podcast. We're going to do our best. We're going to bring on successful business owners, the people who drive the cities, share a lot about what makes our city so great. So you can be confident and comfortable. This is a city that you want to call home. David, thanks for coming on This Is Jax.
Thanks for having me, Nate.
Yeah,
it's an honor.
I'm excited to be in this. We've our paths have crossed a couple times.
Yeah,
and this is the first time in this capacity that we're getting together.
Yeah, I was trying to think back when you and Shauna and I met.
Yeah,
God, it's been at least 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah,
and your family was slightly smaller, and now it's slightly larger. So that's good.
True. That's true. It is. So we're going to talk a little bit about Jacksonville. I want to hear your story. And for the listener out there, they don't know you. So this is an opportunity for them to get to know you.
Sure.
So the first thing I kind of want to know is, you weren't born here in Jacksonville, but in Jacksonville, for the listeners out there, we often refer to Jacksonville kind of northeast Florida, because Jacksonville is so big and sprawling that it kind of spills over into the outside county. So, David, you're actually from Clay County, but for the purposes of this, and we'll talk about that a lot more, but for the purpose of this question, what year did you first move to Jacksonville?
So I'm actually born and raised in Orlando, as I jokingly say, before Disney. So if any of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Orlando, back in the day when I was there was about 65,000 people. So not a lot of people before Disney. And so I graduated from UCF, University of Central Florida, with a finance degree. And my sister and I started a business in 1989.
Okay.
We were in the furniture business as manufacturers reps. And so we had a multi-line rep group that covered the entire state of Florida. And she lived in Tampa and covered Orlando. She gave me the territory of Pensacola to Key West. Wasn't that nice?
Wow. Okay.
So I was traveling from Orlando to Jacksonville, and it became apparent that, to use a phrase, that Jacksonville became a better pivot city, than it would be for me to commute back and forth from Orlando. And so I moved to Jacksonville, Avondale specifically, about 1992. And so I found a great little fourplex over on Van Wert, right there at St. John's, across the street from Boone Park. And this was Avondale before it was cool.
Right.
Yeah, way back when.
So the shops weren't necessarily brought back to life as a trendy place to be. Were they closed up at the time? Were they up and running, or were they just the hardware store?
It was total transition. So from you and being in the real estate industry, you would appreciate this. There was a gas station, which now is a Realtor, right there next to Underwood's. And that was the place that had a payphone. This is back in the day when we had cell phones, but everyone was roaming. So you had to pick and choose where you're going to make your phone calls.
Or if it wasn't after 9 p.m.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So I would go to that convenience store to use their payphone, basically. But it was right at the time when Avondale, as you know, neighborhoods mature, and so people live there, and then it starts to age out, and people start to die. And so those beautiful homes that are there were totally at their maturity. They were showing the wear and tear of being owned by the same owner for maybe 30, 40 years.
Right.
And attrition was happening. So people were dying, and people were moving back into that community and starting to refurbish.
Okay.
And so none of the shops were there. All the things that people take for granted now were not there at all. Okay. Except for Underwood.
So what was in that space?
Well, that convenience store was a 7-Eleven, or I don't know what it was, but maybe it was even empty. But it was basically, there was a payphone on the outside that I would use. I would use the public restroom down at St. Vincent's Hospital.
Okay.
That was one of my stops. And then, of course, that payphone I keep talking about was one of my offices that was in Avondale. I kept somehow coming back to Avondale. I would go to the Fox, the Fox Diner in the early days. and have breakfast or lunch there, just depending on what time of day I got there. And then it just dawned on me, I wanted to live somewhere in Orlando. We were blowing up. And so all the new apartment complexes were coming out of the ground. And a good buddy of mine, Steve, he even said, you got to find this place on Bay Meadows. That's where all the chicks are and all the new apartment complexes. And I wanted something older, more historic. And in the business I was in was a lot of interior designers and architects. And so they were keen on the Riverside Avondale, project, as it were. And so I found this place and felt like it was probably built in the late 40s or 50s, a fourplex, and wood floors and jalousie windows, but it was cool. It was a cool scene. It was walking distance from Monty's, which was a packaged liquor store at the time, which was beneficial to a single guy. So,
and being single and living there in Avondale during that, how old were you then?
So I must have been 30.
Okay.
Yeah. So 30 years old when I was.
So you had some, it wasn't like you just got right out of high school or something. You had some grown up life experience up to that point. Can you give us a little backstory on, your travels or what you were doing in between that?
So I in high school, I finished high school, played a little football in college, and realized that I wasn't going to go anywhere with that. It was small school out west. And then kind of played around. I had to pay for my school. So I was pretty entrepreneurial in the very beginning. I started a landscape company with a buddy of mine, Orlando.
Okay.
And we did everything soup to nuts you can imagine with that. And then finally it dawned on me, I wanted to go to school. And so we were working too many crews and I wasn't going to school. I was cutting classes. But another friend of mine came along and said, hey, why don't you come with me this summer to London? And so in 84, I was just what I call soon to be educated redneck in Orlando.
Right.
We went to London.
Okay.
And lived and worked on the economy in the West End over at Oxford Street.
Yeah.
And it turned a 3-month vacation turned into about a 9-month trip. We were abroad for 6 months and then better part of 3 months in London. Okay. So that got me fired up for getting finished with school. And so when I came back, I said, look, I can stay in London. Once you're there, it's easy to kind of get around and do things. But I was limited because I didn't have a degree. And so I came back and finished my AA and enrolled in finance over at UCF and cranked it out by 88, 89. I graduated and then was still working, got a job as an accountant with a real estate developer, Westgate. Okay. And then my sister and I started the company soon after that.
So your intent was to finish school to get back to London?
In fact, I did. I applied with Bank of America as a UK branch. You'd have to go through Charlotte, and then get to London, and I didn't get the job. So I said, well, I guess I'm not smart enough, or I didn't have an MBA, and so I would go back to my entrepreneurial. I really didn't want to be a banker. I mean, everyone thought I was going to be a banker in finance, but I was always a sales guy, and so I wanted to understand what the CEO's problem was and the CFO's problems. That's why I got a finance degree. Then I could talk their language and be able to help them, bring solutions to the table.
Right. My understanding is that, the finance degree was kind of as close as you could get to studying something to do with entrepreneurial, to kind of get into that world. It wasn't like there was a small business studies or anything.
No, not back then.
Yeah.
Well, it was a crazy journey. My father was an electrical engineer, and I started out mechanical engineering, and I got to these 2 classes. It's called fluids and differential equations. And so every engineer I've ever talked to since then, the diffie Qs and the fluids, they know it very intimately. And I came home to my dad, said, Uncle, I'm out. I can't do it. And he goes, I understand, So I went and started in accounting. And I'm this crazy guy that likes talking to people. So I literally interviewed a bunch of CPAs and said, am I a good fit for this? And all of them said it'd be a great job, Theus, but your personality, you'll be bored of it. And so I didn't want to go to management or something else. So I went to finance next. And that was, it covered a lot of stuff at UCF. We covered securities, we covered banking, we covered investment, time value of money and those sorts of things. So I thought it was a well-rounded degree for me to get that accomplished. So it worked out well.
And then it just kind of happened that you came to Jacksonville. So like it does for so many. David, You've had a self-employed career spanning over 30 years, correct?
Yeah.
So, including time in your contract office furniture industry, and then you got into investment and insurance industry. Can you share some of the key lessons, experiences that you had along the way from these professions that have shaped your approach to business and coaching, which we can get into?
Yeah. So in hindsight, I'll be 61 this year. And I was thinking about this the other day, that why was I always in business for myself? And sometimes my wife will quickly remind me that I did some things that cut my nose off, so to speak. I didn't like working for other people. I always said, if I'm going to fail, it's going to be my fault. And as an entrepreneur, you better get used to failing sometimes. And you do that. And so, but I consider myself a great student of people. And one of my biggest motivators is why people do what they do. And so I'm always studying and watching people, what they do. And so I just was a sponge every step of the way after I left the furniture business. You may remember the towers got hit in 9/11, which decimated the manufacturing business. One of our factories was Herman Miller at the time, and people weren't buying furniture that way. And so the next leg for me was my mother and father were in their 80s, well into their 80s, and dying. And so I got to see firsthand what long-term care looked like. And so I was fortunate enough to get licensed with John Hancock and start selling long-term care insurance as an entrepreneur. I didn't know what I was doing. I just saw a need, and we're going to provide a solution. And then after a certain amount of business, they brought me into the office, and I got securities license and became a registered representative, what they call it, for about 13 years. Your question regarding how did I say that again? Do you remember the question?
Yeah. So the question is, you've got kind of the experience and the backstory there, but you're into business coaching as well. So what experiences from that are you able to kind of bring into your coaching?
Well, I think the first lesson is be a good listener.
Okay.
I kind of dropped the ball on that one.
No, it's okay.
Some
of these questions are like a little bit longer. There's like two parts to them. So we got the first part. Now we're getting to the second. So
good call. I think the biggest gift I have to my clients when I was in the coaching business was my wisdom, that's happened over years. The lessons I've learned is we talk about in the financial services business about creating urgency. And maybe you hear this in the real estate business. You got to buy today because the rates are going to be different tomorrow. You got to lock in the rate, whatever it is. And what I've discovered over time, just like you or myself, the urgency is a little bit of a fallacy. Urgency happens when people want to do what they want to do. And so one of the things I try to take away from my clients is a sale happens when that person needs what you have. Or better yet, a customer is someone who understands what you offer and needs what you have to offer and is willing to meet you at the price that you're offering you that. And so there's some other tricks to that. But I think the thing that I can take away from my clients in the coaching position is slow down. That we're not going to fix it all today. Be a good listener to serve your customer. Listen to your customer. Don't always walk out with, this is what I want to do. Yeah. Because sometimes what you want ain't what the other guy wants to do. So you've got to be a good listener and be flexible, be nimble as an entrepreneur. And then if you can focus on serving your customer first. I wake up every day and look in the mirror and go, who's my customer? Whether it's a client or now I'll talk about me being a teacher now, my students or whomever I'm serving. If you can do that first, then a lot of your problems will be solved. Take your time.
Yeah, no, that's good. That reminds me of something I kind of call like relational rather than transactional.
Yeah.
And to go a little bit further with that, we've taken where even the words we speak and the way we say them kind of sometimes control what's in our brain, right? And so changing the word even up from like a past client to a life client. So once we start building that relationship with you, we're hoping that you're a life client versus just a past client, that we got our transaction. Now it's moving on to the next, rather it's continued nurture.
The language that we use, our lexicon, is important. Most people don't think about it, but my wife is in kind of the legalese profession. She's not a lawyer, but she says words have meaning. Yeah. And so one of the fellows I worked with in the financial services business was keen on correcting some of the phraseology. Like I used to say, let's pitch this idea. And he says, Dave, we don't pitch, we present. And so transaction versus relationship. I'm a huge person. around relationships. Relationships are the things that we can invest in. A transaction happens today, it's gone tomorrow.
Sure.
Maybe we'll see it again. Most of the time it's price driven or convenience driven. Relationships are more. So I want to work with people that I enjoy being their friend too. So
that's good.
Just a couple points there.
So before we move on to kind of what you have going on now and we leave the entrepreneur world, what effect did Jacksonville have as a city or a location on your, path of entrepreneurship?
So it was a pretty cool town. It is a pretty cool town. And I was here in a very special time because it was just before the Jaguars landed. And so growing up in Orlando, I got to see kind of a precursor of what could happen with growth. And we saw Orlando just explode. Oftentimes people think it grew I do. It grew too fast and out of control. And so in governance in local Duval County, there's been this idea that we're going to have controlled growth. And I used to joke around and say that this town takes 4 steps back and 5 steps backwards, or 4 steps forward and 5 steps backwards. And it did that for a while, but it took some time for some new blood to come in. I mean, it's a city of the South. And we say it's the first coast, a couple other colloquial things that go along with it. But the reality is it's a city of the South. And so it's a small town with a big footprint. Yes. And it's definitely changed. I mean, I just saw an article that we've just bumped into number 10 at 980,000 people, which is exciting. But then it's not, it's kind of not, there's that growth factor that we want to make sure that we're growing at the same pace that we can keep up with each other. But I have to say I was on the front end of something cool really happening. Living in Avondale, I was there the day that Biscotti's opened up.
Yeah.
Barbara and her partner and I were friends. I mean, I was walking distance from their spot. I got to see all of that shop blossom and turn into something that evolved into other locations. We got to see San Marco blow up and reinvest in itself. Different parts of town experience new growth and new money. And so there was some really cool stuff going on. Did the Jaguars, was it a perfect solution? I was a season ticket holder. The joke is they still owe me money because they didn't win enough games. But but it was a fun time to be in Jacksonville, definitely, when that growth was happening.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. In your opinion today, like you said, you kind of touched on what I believe is what I talk about, the pace of Jacksonville being a little bit slower, and for an entrepreneur, that's an advantage, right? Yeah. But that won't last forever, as the secret is getting out about Jacksonville.
They found it. Yeah.
Right. So you were there at the forefront of that. I'm maybe here at the middle, maybe the end. I don't know how much time is left on that pace before it picks up. But in your opinion, what recent development or initiative best captures the direction that we're headed?
Well, you can't go to another city with a more beautiful riverfront. I've been fortunate in traveling most of the United States and across, of course, living abroad. And by no means am I equating Jacksonville to some of the European, Venice or something like that. But the St. Johns River is a beautiful body of water, and it's a natural element that we really need to protect and preserve. But it does bring some beautiful landscape and some beautiful ambiance to the city. Yeah. Now, I won't get into too much detail, but it has grown, and there's been some factors that have hindered its growth in the city around the river because they want to do it in a controlled manner. But I think we've got some people in place now that are really going to bring that to fruition. I mean, it's a beautiful riverfront. We've got some cool things that are going on downtown. The challenge downtown is to provide more parking. Yeah. People can get back to repatriate the cities, the urban field. But the Jaguars will be part of that. And so with the entertainment and the music and so forth that goes on. So there's some cool things ahead.
Have you been down to the fountain since it's been reopened?
I was just coming up 295 through Gate, and I'm like, wow, where'd all these buildings come from? So I have not, which is terrible. Yeah,
make it down there. I went down there recently, and I got to say, there aren't too many things that impress me. I'm never really taken aback or anything. Yeah. I'm like, what'd you expect? But when I went there, I was pleasantly surprised at the update. And I remember going there and, whether on a date or whatever, and it was like me and my date and nobody else because nobody, but we went down there was tons of families, there was music, like the ice cream truck, so it was pretty cool. And then it connected right there to that river walk, which I know there's some discussion about because right there on the San Marcos side, right, there's some shops that are available.
Right.
But they're kind of slow. And I think one of the things is they're trying to pass some different laws, maybe like for food and drink and what can be on that walk. So anyway, well, let's talk a little bit. Let's transition a little bit here. Okay. Let's fast forward. So you retired from being self-employed, but you're still really involved in the community.
Yeah.
You're coming up on your third year as a business education teacher, correct?
Correct.
And you're the advisor of the Future Business Leaders of America chapter.
Correct.
Can you tell us for the listeners out there that are like, I don't know what that means. What can you give us the?
So I'll try to be quick and give you the cliff notes. And in 2019 is when I left the industry, my wife said, come home so I can be close to my youngest daughter. So unlike my oldest daughter, I was working all the time, really didn't have that great a relationship until now, of course.
Okay.
But so I did come home in 2019. And then in 2020, I did this crazy thing. You might remember this.
Yeah.
I ran for Congress.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yes. And I was hoping we'd get into that. So
yeah,
ran for Congress.
Yeah. Ted Yoho had announced that he was going to self-retire. I won't get into the long story, but it just came across as something I was supposed to do. I can't really, I can tell you, but not for the sake of the podcast. We won't do that today. But so I ran for Congress in the 3rd district, and it was that race during COVID where we had 10 candidates on the Republican side.
Yeah, there was a ton.
It was crazy. And I got to travel to 6 different counties. I'm a numbers guy. I met 10,000 people from December 23rd to August 18th at the primary. And of course I lost. But what it did is it showed me that we had a significant shortage of substitute teachers and teachers in our communities.
So you learned along the way.
Oh yeah. I got to see behind the curtain politically and what was going on in real time. And so it dawned on me, I got this gig with Promote Clay, this thing that I'm doing, and which you and I kind of met on.
Yes.
And it's only on Thursdays. So I got a lot of free time. I can only play so much golf with my daughter, who's a 4-year letterman from school and college.
That's right.
So I got to find something else to do. And so I started substitute teaching.
Okay.
And I liked it. With a finance degree, I could get certified as a certified teacher through the state education thing. And I told my wife, I won't get too political here, but my fear was if Biden got elected, that business was going to take it in the short, so to speak.
Yeah.
And he did get elected. And I said, my clients are going to be in trouble, at least not deep in trouble, but I mean, it could be a little bit more challenging. And I was loving teaching. And so I said, I'm going to go get certified and just see what happens. And so I literally had substituted every school in the county, in Clay County. And I figured out the kindergartners were too short. Second, third, they were just too short for me. I enjoyed the big crayons, but they were too short. So I loved middle school and high school. And so I got a gig teaching at Fleming Allen High School that October of 21. They had a teacher that was leaving for some other duty or something. And I jumped in October, had 5 different classes in the business education. And then not unlike the county, they didn't renew me that first year, which was fine. So I just went about my business. And then that summer, I got a phone call at the beginning of next year from Lake Asbury Junior High. And they said, 2 of our business ed teachers have transferred. Can you help us out? And that was on Friday before classes started on Wednesday. And so I wasn't drinking totally from the fire hose like I was at Fleming Island, but I said, I'll pray about it. I'll get back to you on Monday. They said, hurry up. Class starts on Wednesday. And so I took the keys from them on Tuesday, and my first day was Wednesday.
Wow.
So the FBLA thing, the Future Business Leaders of America, I got to meet this lady by the name of Brenda Kirkland over at Fleming Island. She's my counterpart. And she became a mentor of mine, so to speak, and saw how cool it was.
Yeah.
And so she encouraged me to do that over at Lake Asbury. And it turned out to be the greatest thing I could ever do. It gives me juice to get up and go to school because I get to talk about entrepreneurship. I get to talk about ethics. I get to talk about integrity. I get to talk about being a professional and all those things that you do in business, if you're going to do it right. And so we got really cool. We had a group of 5 kids. One of them, they all qualified for state, I believe. One kid won state, and then we took him to Atlanta and nationals. He won the national championship for a speech he did as a 7th grader. And then this year we're going back. He won second place in state, and this is last year. I'll have him. He'll be a ninth grader next year.
Wow.
So we're going back to Orlando for another national championship. Hopefully he brings home the prize. So
that's really cool.
The FBLA thing has been really cool. It's been a blessing, an added feature to my teaching. And I teach business education classes under the Career Technology and Education CTE program. So very important part of our curriculum that we offer in Clay County as well.
That's awesome stuff. And when we talk Clay County, just to give some direction, it's on the southwest side of Jacksonville. But it's still important to the purpose of this because there's a lot of people that live out there that commute into the city, and there's a new freeway and everything that's making that even easier. I know a lot of military people who commute to the base, they live there. So a lot of these future business leaders that you're, interacting with may have a role in, our city should they choose to stay here long term. So that's a great story. So what are some of your goals, talking about the future of them? What's your goals for those students? How do you hope to impact their futures?
Well, I tell each class, this year will be my third year, and I tell each class when they come into the classroom to be a member of the club, I don't need anyone. I have to hold your hand. I want self-starters. And they kind of look at, 7th and 8th graders. They don't have a clue what you're talking about. And so I tell them, look, I'm not going to hold your hand. I need critical thinkers. I need people. There's not a problem with you asking a question, but I need you to be solvers or attempting to solve things. And I'm going to help you along the way, of course. Yeah. But I don't want to hold your hand. I need some self-starters. And that usually narrows the group pretty quickly. But this past year we had 12, whittled down to 10. And then we ended up taking 5 of them to state. No, actually we took 10 to state. Okay. And then we go back nationals with 1.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Being an entrepreneur and a business, someone that works for someone else, you've got to be, I always talk about being nimble, being quick, being an idea guy, being a solutionist, thinking about what is the problem we need to solve? What's our customer looking for us to do? Those are things that you can't wait around for someone to tell you. You got to throw it against the wall sometimes. Sometimes it'll stick and sometimes it won't. But you got to have the nerve and the bravity. Is that a word? That's not a word. The courage.
Brevity is a word.
That's short. You got to have the courage. Thank you. I'm a teacher. That's my lexicon. You got to have the courage to try something even though it may fail. And so that's the message I want to get across. I mean, we're not doing future, time value of money or present value of money calculations with them. We're just getting them to start thinking about, how do I solve problems?
That's good. That's good. And it's valuable. It's especially in society today. It's nice to know that there's somebody there in a classroom that's kind of putting that type of thought into it, not just going through the motions. In addition to teaching, you do continue to play active roles in the community, right? In community service. What are you doing to stay involved?
Okay, so I want to share a coaching tip for you. Okay, and this will tie right into it. Dovetails nicely. So I live by this rule of 3s, 5s, and 7s. So before your audience thinks this guy's a numerologist or something like that, let me explain it real quick. And so over my soon to be 61 years, I've realized that I can do some things very well, and I can do a lot of things pretty well, but it's sketchy. And so it's really 3s, 5s, 7s, and 9s. But let's stay in 3s, 5s, and 7s. And so what I've learned is I'm a husband, father, and a grandfather. Okay, that's a big pot, but that's one pot. I'm a Lake Asbury Junior High middle school teacher, business education teacher. That's 2. I'm the FBLA advisor. That's 3. I'm the chairman of the board for the Clothes Closet and Food Pantry located here in Orange Park. That's 4. And I'm the president of the Clay Men's Republican Club here in Clay County. So that's 5. And I learned some time ago that 5 elements of my life is like hitting the tennis ball in the sweet spot, or the golf club, hitting a golf ball right in the sweet spot. Now I can do 7, and I've done 9 before, but my problem is I want to do it at the best of my ability. And so I don't want to burn myself out, and I know my limitations. So if you can learn early on, okay, I can do all this stuff. I'm superhuman, but really, am I going to perform at my highest level? That's okay to do that. So that's what's keeping me busy. Right now, I'm a teacher, which is kind of cool. Having been self-employed all my life, it's bizarre having almost 2 months off, but I'm busy. So I've got this past meeting for the Clay Men's Republican Club, for example. We had Brian Sexton. You might know Brian Sexton, the past voice of the Jaguars.
Yeah.
He was our keynote speaker we meet at Santioni's Italian restaurant there in Flemington. So we get together a bunch of guys. Okay. Women are invited as well, but it's a men's club. We jokingly say it's the legal gentlemen's club in Clay County, the only one.
Okay.
But we do that. And then we have kind of political speak that comes in as well. And then the chairmanship that I'm involved in for the Clothes Closet is a labor of love. That's just something. We're an organization that started in 1952, 1954. A woman was in the Navy, and she saw that some of the guys in the Navy, the underclassmen or the enlisted guys, didn't have a lot of money back in the day, and so they were short on clothing. And she would literally collect clothes from other people out of the back of her Rambler trunk, and help other of those Navy enlisted guys with clothing. So we're a 9,000 square foot facility in Orange Park. We offer free clothing and free food to Orange Park and Fleming Island area on an ongoing basis. So it's pretty cool. And there's about 150, hopefully Mandy won't get me in trouble, 150, less than 200 volunteers. Nobody's paid. It's all volunteered. And we're open Monday through Saturday.
Nice.
So it's pretty cool. It's keeping me pretty busy.
Yeah, I can imagine. It sounds like it. David, you've got a ton of a wealth of experience, a lot of life that you've lived, and seems like a pretty good one. And you're still doing it. I appreciate you taking time out of that schedule to come in here and sit down with me and have this conversation. I feel like we could have this conversation forever, but we have had 5 major questions. So there's your number coming up into the
I think we did pretty good at it.
The show.
You did a great job.
If someone out there is listening and they want to get in touch with you for whatever reason, whether it's your coaching or they want to know more about the Clothes Closet or whatever it is, what's the best way for them to reach out and contact you?
So I'll give you a crazy idea. You can call me on my cell phone. I don't know if people do this very much anymore, but 904-894-2052. And of course, if I don't answer, leave a voicemail. And then I do have a website, David Theus, all one word, DAVIDTHEUS.US. It's in the verge of being a little updated to get some of the business stuff out of it since I've retired in December 31. But either way, you can reach out. And you can reach out that way. The phone number works pretty well.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, again, thank you for coming on. And as always, thank you for listening.